Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside NATO, The Cold War Goes Hot, Designer Signature Edition. This is a game designed by Bruce Maxwell and published by Compass Games. This is without a doubt one of the most anticipated war games for 2021. I know it is for me, and I'm real excited that it's finally here, and I'm going to share a look inside with you today. If you've been watching the channel, you've seen the interviews I've done with Bruce, as well as the playthrough tutorial that we did for the ball tap scenario, the introductory scenario in this box. And listening to Bruce talk about this game and the design process he's gone through redesigning this game from the original edition, it's just been an interesting journey. And I know it's been a real interesting journey for him as well. His passion for the project, his enthusiasm, and his knowledge of the subject are very infectious, and to me provides a high level of confidence that we're going to have a really fantastic game here. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. NATO Designer Signature Edition is a division brigade level simulation of a Warsaw Pact invasion of Western Europe. The game map depicts the area from Denmark to the Swiss Alps and from France to Poland. The time frame covers the first 14 days of the war, after which one side or the other has usually run out of an army. The game offers 4 different scenarios covering a surprise attack from a standing start, an attempt by the Warsaw Pact to quietly prepare without tipping NATO off beforehand, an extended buildup of forces by both sides before war breaks out, and an introductory scenario covering the invasion of Denmark. This NATO Designer Signature Edition has been upgraded with a new game system, new units, new scenarios, new tables, and new player aid cards. Additional enhancements introduced in this edition include supersized components, 9 16th-inch counters, and 2 game maps with larger hexes and new artwork. The map has also been extensively updated based on modern satellite imagery. All scenarios now feature a separate order of battle for 1983 and 1988. The combat system is built around the concept that the best defense is a good offense. It features air power, attack helicopters, artillery, chemical warfare, airborne and air mobile units, reserves, counterattacks, rapid maneuver, and envelopment, allowing for a rich set of tactical options in battle. This is not a game where the Warsaw Pact attacks and NATO defends. Both players have to attack relentlessly if they want to defeat their opponent. And you can see an example of the map and the counters up here. On the left-hand side here, it says it is rated medium complexity, 1 turn equals 24 hours, 15 miles per hex. The unit scale is brigades and divisions, abstract air and naval units. It is for 2 to 4 players, best with 2. It is a medium solitaire suitability, and the average playing time is 3 to 8 hours based on the scenario. And inside we get 2 22 by 34 inch maps, 4 counter sheets, 8 player aid cards, 3 reinforcement cards, a rulebook, a playbook, and 2 6-sided dice. So let's take a look inside and see what you get. All right, we have our 2d6. Little sheet of errata here. It says the counters bearing an A are air reinforcements. Counters bearing an S are sea reinforcements. They both deploy in the strategic reserve box at the start for NATO and Warsaw Pact. Below that it says game components, 2 dice, no specific color. And we have a few player aid cards, our rule book, and it's packaged with the playbook, and looks like in between we also have the player aid cards. So all nicely packaged together. And we have the counter sheets, which are shrink wrapped, because these fall out pretty much if you don't have them shrink wrapped. Then we have our 2 maps. So let's set up the map and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with the game. It is a beautifully done map. Compass did a fantastic job with it. You're going to take the 2 22 by 34 inch sections. You're going to overlay one on top of the other, creating one map that is 43 inches long by 34 inches wide. So ballpark that at 3.5 by 3 feet. Not a tiny map by any stretch, but not a giant monster map that people are going to have trouble fitting on their tables. 3.5 by 3 feet, I think pretty much everybody has tables bigger than that. Speaking of tables, we have tables on the left and the right-hand side. Left-hand side, we have the NATO tables, and on the right-hand side, the Warsaw Pact tables. Both will have the combat results table, but then there are also faction-specific tables on either side. On the NATO side, we have the deep interdiction table, counterattack, strike, and the interception tables. On the Warsaw Pact side, we have the nuclear strike table, the interception table, the airfield chemical strike table, and the chemical strike table. Along either side, you're going to have reinforcement boxes as well as various tracks for tracking air points, supply, victory points, chemical munitions, things like that. Along the bottom, you're going to have the helicopter and lift command displays for both the NATO and the Warsaw Pact. And then you'll have the game turn track over here phase track. And then for the Warsaw Pact, you also have the tension level track. And for NATO, you have the alert level track. The terrain on the map is very easy to read, as you can see here. It's beautifully done. I really love the rendering on this map. You've got rough, forest, mountains. The different cities are easy to pick out. The key cities are in red. The gray cities are minor cities, and the blue-gray cities are major cities. Then you also have the command zone boundaries, like for Baltap and North Ag there, and Centag and North Ag right along the middle. And then the big orange boundary is the Iron Curtain boundary, so very easy to tell the delineation between the Warsaw Pact forces and the NATO forces. Overall, really love this map. It's very easy to read, and it looks really great on the table. Can't wait to throw this down and start playing. I will take a look at the 4 player aids that come to the game. They're all double-sided. We have the Warsaw Pact War Preparations chart, the Airspace Effects chart, Supply chart, Warsaw Pact Airfield Chemical Strike table, and the Chemical Strike table. Same tables that you'll see on the map as well. On the back, we have the Zone of Control Effects chart and the Unit Movement Summary chart, along with all of the applicable notes at the bottom. On the next player aid card, we have the Unit Summary chart, which breaks down all the different types of units in the game, the NATO Alert Level chart, and the NATO Deep Interdiction table. Again, the same tables that you'll see on the map. And on the back, we have the Combat Results table, as well as the Counterattack table. Then we have the air campaign tables for each of the different scenarios, Strategic Surprise, War of Nerves, and Extended Buildup, and then the strike table along the right-hand side. And on the back, we have the airspace chart, the Warsaw Pact interception table, nuclear strike table, and the NATO interception table at the bottom. And then the last 2 are foldouts for both the NATO and the Warsaw Pact forces that'll break down your turn, and it'll give you all the steps that you'll take in each turn. The steps are almost identical, except each faction does have some specific steps that it'll do on its own or differently. And on the back, we have the terrain effects chart, which gives you the different types of terrain, the movement costs, the defense effects, attack effects, and the after combat effects, as well as applicable notes on the right-hand side. Then we get setup sheets for the different scenarios. Here we have the Baltap scenario. On the reverse side, we have the Strategic Surprise Reinforcement Schedule set in 1988. On the next sheet, we have the Strategic Surprise Reinforcement Schedule for 1983. On the back of that, we have the Extended Buildup Reinforcement Schedule for 1983. And on the last setup card, we had the Strategic Surprise Reinforcement Schedule for 1988. And on the back, we have the Strategic Surprise Reinforcement Schedule for 1983. Next, we'll take a look at the counters that come with the game. We have Soviet forces on the left, East German forces below that, United States forces here, Polish forces, and at the bottom we have Czech forces. On the next sheet, we have British, Belgian, Dutch, and West German forces on the left, remaining US forces on the top right, French, Danish, and remaining East German forces on the right-hand side, and the start of the administrative counters at the bottom right. On the next sheet, we have more administrative counters, including airlift, helicopter, and sea lift command markers, nuclear and chemical strike markers for both Warsaw Pact and NATO. And on the last sheet are the remaining administrative counters for the game. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is an 87-page full-color rulebook. The inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents, which spans 2 pages, giving you all the rules and the associated page numbers. And for an 87-page rulebook, you definitely want that because it's a dense rulebook. There's a lot of stuff here. Some things to bear in mind about the fact that it's an 87-page rulebook, which we're going to discuss as we're looking through it. The first bit here is going to give you all the breakdown of the components, the unit types in the game, the symbols, the unit sizes, the terminology used in the game, and how to use all of your counters, including not just the unit counters, but your administrative markers as well. So you can see that eats up a lot of the pages here. And then we get to the sequence of play here on page 17. That's going to give you the outline, and then you have the full sequence of play, all going to be explained out to you over the next couple of pages, just what each of these steps is. Then we get into the rules themselves. And zones of control is one of the first rules. The interesting thing here, this is a great innovation, something that was done by Bruce that I think should be done by every designer going forward. It is a really fantastic thing, and it's called the Veteran Summary. How many games have we played with zones of control? We all understand how zones of control work for the most part. For a new player, they may not. Well, if you read through the zone of control rules all the time, Generally, we skim them, but you read through them, you're looking for anything that may be different in this game versus other games. Oftentimes, we miss it too if we skim through it and don't read it. Well, instead of making you read the next few pages, you just read the veteran summary that is going to list out all of the differences in the zones of control, or how they're handled in this game compared to your standard zone of control. It breaks it all down here in this long paragraph, and then it says, skip the following section. So you understand that, you bounce over, and you go right to stacking. You don't have to worry about the zones of control stuff. Here it says, gives you another paragraph. Here's how to understand stacking, and then skip the following section. So guess what? You don't have to read that part. Supply gives you an explanation, and it goes into really good detail about the supply rules here for the veteran summary. But then it says, read this section starting at page 10.7. So I can jump right across over to 10.7, saving me a few pages of rules right there. And then I get into the resupply operations. From here on forward is the stuff I'll need to know, being that we understand supply. This is where you're going to need to jump in at. So you can see things are a lot really verbose and a lot easier to read with that veteran summary. I think it's a fantastic thing that Bruce has come up with. You have illustrated examples throughout the game, as we're seeing here. Get into airspace and the enemy airspace, Danish airspace, a lot of designer's notes. Bruce has really sprinkled in a lot of information, extra information throughout the game. All these little designer's notes, the veteran summary, all these things are really fantastic. And it's going to be a dense rulebook. It's a lot to learn. But it's also going to be easier to learn because of the veteran summary. And then the designer's notes sprinkled in here to explain to you why a rule is done a certain way, or what was going on, what he's modeling. I think that's really fantastic. We have an example of paradrop and amphibious operations here, helicopter movement, another example of an insertion operation, an extraction operation. Then we get into strikes, nuclear warfare, nuclear strikes, Armageddon roll, airfield nuclear strikes, air squadron dispersal, chemical warfare, chemical strikes, airfield chemical strikes. Then we have the war crimes victory point penalty, air power, air points, executing airstrikes. You see a lot of information here. Ground combat, we get into illustrated examples for that. Yeah, flank attacks, concentric attacks, retreats, and how those are handled. Examples, the breakthrough zones, multiple combat examples here for you illustrated. Coordination, Warsaw Pact coordination, NATO coordination, how those are handled. Assaults, example of assault, reserve phase, headquarters units, how those are used in the game. Cities, West Berlin, national surrender, reinforcements. We get to victory on page 83. All the steps for victory. And then we are at the back of the rule book. Next, we'll take a look at the playbook. This is a 55-page book. Inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents, which lists out all the scenarios, which cover the first half of the book. The last half is for the design notes, historical unit information, order of battle, and the bibliography. The intro scenario, the Baltap scenario, the Baltic approaches, that's the one that Bruce and I did the video of on the channel. If you've not watched it, feel free to do so. Maybe do it while you're setting up the scenario itself. This is the best way to learn the game, is playing the scenario. It's low counter density, play it under a couple hours, and you'll get most of the rules down that you're going to be using in the game. So you play that once or twice, you're ready to move on to the next scenario. Next scenario is the strategic surprise scenario. You'll see all the rules explained out to you here for each of the scenarios, special scenario rules, things like that. Extended build-up scenario, all the rules here, including designer's notes, all explained out to you here. Then we have the War of Nerves special rules, activation and movement, mobilization, War of Nerves reinforcements, and then we get to the War of Nerves scenario. And everything listed out for you there over the next couple of pages. And then we get to the designer's notes here on page 25. Page 26. And Bruce gives some pretty detailed notes on his design philosophy on the game. Then you have the historical unit information, order of battle here for the next few pages, all the different fronts. Then the NATO order of battle for 1983. Order of battle for 1988 for NATO. And then the bibliography here on page 53, 54, and then credits on page 55. And we are at the back of the playbook. And that is a look at everything you get inside of NATO, the Cold War Goes Hot Designer Signature Edition. This is a game designed by Bruce Maxwell and published by Compass Games. As I said at the beginning of the video, I think this is the most anticipated war game of 2021, and it is finally here. Compass did another amazing job on this. Counters, the map, the player aids, the rulebook, playbook are just all top-notch. Fantastic production from Compass, and the rulebook is just really, really solid. Bruce did an amazing job on this rulebook. It's a complex game, 87 pages of rules. There's a lot of things to understand in this rulebook, but Bruce went to great lengths to make sure that everything was as verbose as possible, there was no ambiguity, and he even tried to expedite understanding the rules by adding in the veteran summary, which is a great innovation, and I implore every wargame designer to add that into their rules going forward. Zocs, supply, all these things are mechanics that are used in all rulebooks, and we always see them again and again, and for the most part, they tend to be very similar. There are differences amongst them. But instead of making somebody read 1, 2, 3, or 4 pages of rules to explain supply or a Zoc or however, whatever the mechanic is, instead of having them read through all that, just give a summary. If you understand Zocs, this is all you need to know about the Zocs in this game. Instead of making somebody go through 4 pages or skim through it and overlook what may be the change that you've added into your game. Instead, have that concise veteran summary, and you can just move on to the next subject. You'll find that people get through your rule books a lot faster and get the games on the table. Especially when it's a rule book like this, 87 pages, that really is a big help in understanding this game. So looking forward to getting into this one and getting some NATO and Warsaw Pact action on my table. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.